What does it take for a global corporation to lose a $200 million deal overnight? It wasn't a stock market crash, a failed merger, or a catastrophic system failure. For Delta Airlines, it was a single 5-minute encounter at the frosted glass doors of their most exclusive airport lounge. It was one employee, one condescending question, and one CEO who had spent his life overcoming obstacles, only to find one more in the most unexpected of places. This isn't just a story about a cancelled contract. It's a story about the true cost of disrespect and the swift, devastating karma that follows. Stay tuned. The air in Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport hummed with a unique energy, a symphony of rolling suitcases, muffled announcements, and the low thrum of thousands of intersecting journeys. It was a cathedral of transit, and for Julian Vance, it was just another node in the complex global network that his life had become. At 48, Julian carried himself with an aura of stillness that seemed to defy the chaos around him. He wasn't tall or physically imposing, but his presence had a certain gravity. It was in his eyes, calm, observant, and reflecting a mind that was always several steps ahead. His suit, a bespoke charcoal wool, was understated, its value apparent only in its perfect cut, not its label. Julian Vance was the founder and CEO of Aura Dynamics, a company that had started in his garage 15 years ago as a fledgling idea about predictive logistics. Today, it was a titan of technology, its AI-powered software the invisible backbone for half of the Fortune 500's supply chains. Aura Dynamics was, in essence, the company that made sure the world's goods got from A to B with terrifying efficiency. Julian wasn't just tech-rich, he was foundational rich. He had built the pipes through which modern commerce flowed. He was flying from a grueling 3-day symposium in Zurich to San Francisco, with a layover in Atlanta. The trip wasn't for business, it was for his daughter, Maya. She was playing the cello in her final high school orchestra recital, a solo performance of Bach's Cello Suite No. 1. He had promised he wouldn't miss it for anything. He'd already missed her 9th grade robotics competition and her debate team regionals last year. This recital was a red line he would not cross. His first-class ticket and his exclusive, invitation-only American Express Centurion card, the mythical Black Card, were not just perks, they were tools. They were instruments designed to slice through the friction of travel, to turn chaotic airports into serene oases of productivity. Time was his most valuable currency, and access was its guardian. As he approached the Delta Sky Club in Concourse F, the airline's flagship international lounge, he felt the familiar, subtle unwinding of travel stress. This was Delta's home turf, their crown jewel. The frosted glass doors slid open to reveal a reception desk of polished marble, staffed by 2 agents in crisp, navy blue Delta uniforms. The air inside smelled faintly of fresh coffee and expensive cleaning products. It was a bubble of calm he had paid a premium for, both personally and professionally. Professionally, the premium was enormous. Julian and his executive team were in the final stages of cementing a monumental partnership with Delta Airlines. The deal, valued at over $200 million, was multifaceted. Aura Dynamics would become the airline's official global logistics and technology partner. This wasn't just a sponsorship logo slapped on a fuselage. It involved a deep integration of Aura's AI into Delta's cargo and baggage handling systems, a revolutionary upgrade promising to virtually eliminate lost luggage and optimize cargo revenue. The deal also included naming rights for the new tech-focused wing of Delta's corporate headquarters and, most visibly, the co-branding of Delta's most elite lounges, which would soon be known as the Delta Sky Club, powered by aura dynamics. The deal was a legacy project for Julian and a game-changer for Delta, positioning them as the most technologically advanced airline in the world. The final contracts were sitting on his chief operating officer's desk, awaiting his final sign-off upon his return. It was a partnership built on a shared vision of precision, efficiency, and premium service. Julian stepped up to the reception desk. A young man was being checked in by one agent, his boarding pass scanned with a welcoming beep. Julian approached the other agent, a woman in her late 50s. Her name tag read Brenda Miller. She had a helmet of meticulously sprayed blonde hair and a gaze that seemed to start at a default setting of mild disapproval. "Good afternoon," Julian said, his voice a low, pleasant baritone. He placed his Centurion card on the counter and held up his phone, displaying his first-class boarding pass. Brenda glanced at the phone, then at the card, then at Julian. Her eyes lingered for a fraction of a second too long. It was a look he had seen 1,000 times before. It was a look of appraisal, of subtle calculation, of a cognitive dissonance she was trying to resolve. It was the look of someone seeing a black man in a place their internal monologue had reserved for someone else. "Boarding pass," she said, her tone flat. He pushed his phone slightly closer. She picked it up without asking, her fingers tapping the screen. "And the card," she added, gesturing to the sleek black metal on the counter. Julian slid it over. Her movements were clipped, efficient, but carried an undercurrent of something else. Scrutiny. He'd seen customs officials with less intensity. She took the card and swiped it through the reader. A green light blinked. She swiped it again. Another green light. She looked from her screen back to Julian. "I'm going to need to see some photo ID." Julian's eyebrows raised a fraction. It was an unusual request. The system was designed to be seamless. The ticket was linked to his Sky Miles account, which had his photo. The credit card was linked to his name. The confluence of a first-class international ticket, a top-tier frequent flyer status, and the Centurion card was typically enough to get a salute, not an interrogation. Still, he kept his composure. He was a man who solved complex logistical problems for a living. A slightly obstructive gatekeeper was a simple variable. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his leather wallet, and produced his driver's license. He placed it on the counter. Brenda picked it up and held it next to his face, her eyes darting between the photo and the man standing before her. The silence stretched. The young man at the other station had already been admitted and was disappearing into the lounge. Julian could hear the faint clink of glasses and the low murmur of conversation from within. "Is there a problem?" Julian asked, his voice still even, but with a new edge of precision. Brenda put the license down, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. "The system is having trouble verifying you. It's flagging your credentials." Julian knew this was a lie. He had designed systems infinitely more complex than this check-in software. There were no flags. The only flag was the one in her mind. "I see," Julian said slowly. "Perhaps you could try again. I fly this route frequently, and I've never had an issue." "I did try again," she snapped, her customer service veneer cracking. "Sir, our policies are very strict. We have to protect the integrity of the club for our paying members." The insinuation was as thick as the humid Georgia air outside. Paying members. As if he had somehow found these credentials in a parking lot. As if he were an imposter, the quiet humiliation began to coil in his stomach. It was a familiar feeling, one he hadn't experienced so acutely in years. It was the feeling of being questioned, of having to justify his own existence in a space he had more than earned the right to occupy. And right now, all he wanted was a quiet corner, a glass of water, and a moment to prepare for the flight to see his daughter. Brenda slid his license and credit card back across the counter, a gesture of finality. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice dripping with an insincerity that was almost theatrical. "But I can't grant you access at this time." The marble counter felt suddenly cold beneath Julian's fingertips. For a moment, the ambient noise of the terminal faded into a dull roar, and the world narrowed to the space between him and Brenda Miller. Her face was a mask of bureaucratic certainty, the kind of unassailable confidence worn by people who wield small amounts of power as if it were a scepter. "Let me be very clear," Julian began, his voice dropping to a lower, more deliberate register. He was no longer a passenger seeking entry. He was a CEO identifying a critical system failure. "I am a Diamond Medallion member. My ticket is a fully paid Delta One fare. This is an American Express Centurion card provided to me as part of a corporate account. There is no logical reason for your system to flag my credentials. The error is not in the system. The error is happening on your side of this counter." He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words were precise, each one landing with calculated weight. He saw a flicker of something in Brenda's eyes, not understanding, but annoyance at being challenged. "Sir, you don't need to take that tone with me," she retorted, puffing up slightly. "I am the lounge manager on duty. I know the policies. Sometimes there are fraud alerts or account mismatches. It happens." "It does not happen to this account," Julian stated. "This account has a 7-figure monthly spend. If there were a fraud alert, my phone would be buzzing with notifications from 3 different security departments. It is not." He gestured to the phone still sitting on the counter. A few people in the check-in line behind him were beginning to shift uncomfortably, sensing the friction. A man in a tailored suit, who had been impatiently tapping his foot, now seemed intrigued by the unfolding drama. Julian decided to try a different tack, appealing to logic. "Is there another system you can use? A manual override? A supervisor you can call? I'm simply trying to get to my gate for my connecting flight, and I have a 3-hour layover." "I am the supervisor," Brenda said, the words a shield, "and I'm not going to override a security flag just because you're impatient." The word impatient stung. It was a deliberate mischaracterization of his calm, logical demeanor. She was painting him as the aggressor, the unreasonable black man making a scene. It was a classic, ugly script, and he was being cast in a role he refused to play. "I am not impatient," Julian corrected her coolly. "I am being denied a service I have paid for. A service your company, Delta Airlines, is contractually obligated to provide. Furthermore, it is a service that my own company is about to invest $200 million to enhance." He hadn't intended to mention the deal. It felt crass, like a threat. But her intransigence, her sheer refusal to engage in any form of problem-solving, had forced his hand. He needed her to understand the magnitude of her mistake. A brief, confused expression crossed Brenda's face. The number was so large, so out of context, that it didn't compute. She processed it not as a fact, but as a bluff, a desperate, aggrandizing lie from a man trying to force his way into a place he didn't belong. Her smirk returned, nastier this time. "Right, $200 million, she said, drawing out the words with mocking disbelief. "Sir, making threats isn't going to get you anywhere. In fact—" She paused for dramatic effect, her hand moving toward a small button under the counter. Julian's blood ran cold. He knew what that button was for. "I am not making a threat," he said, his voice hard as diamond. I am providing you with context you seem to be sorely lacking." "The only context I need is what's on my screen," Brenda said, her finger hovering over the button. "And my screen says no. You have been denied entry. I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the desk and let me help the next guest." Julian stood his ground. He was not a man accustomed to backing down, especially not in the face of such blatant, bone-deep disrespect. It wasn't about the lounge anymore. It was about the principle. He had spent a lifetime building, creating, and proving himself. Precisely so he would not have to endure moments like this. And yet, here he was. "No," Julian said simply. "We are not finished here. You will find a way to resolve this." From the back of the small line, the man in the tailored suit spoke up. "Excuse me? I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, stepping forward. He was a middle-aged Asian man with a friendly, intelligent face. "But I think I know this gentleman. That's Julian Vance, the CEO of Aura Dynamics. I'm Mark Chen from Wired magazine. I saw him speak in Zurich yesterday." Mark Chen extended a hand toward Julian. "Mr. Vance, an incredible keynote on AI ethics. A real pleasure." Julian, momentarily taken aback, shook his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. I appreciate that." Brenda looked at Mark Chen, then back at Julian, her certainty wavering for the first time. The name Aura Dynamics and the mention of Wired magazine were external data points that didn't fit her narrative. But she had already committed. To back down now would be to admit she was wrong. "That doesn't change what I see on my computer," she insisted, her voice tight with defiance. "I don't care who he is. Rules are rules." Mark Chen looked at her, then at Julian, and a look of dawning comprehension spread across his face. He was a journalist. He recognized the texture of this story immediately. The racial undertones, the corporate setting, the powerful figure being stonewalled by a low-level employee. "The rules of entry for Delta One passengers are quite clear," Mark said politely to Brenda. "They receive complimentary access. There's no ambiguity. Perhaps your terminal is malfunctioning." This intervention, meant to help, was like gasoline on a fire. Brenda felt her authority being challenged not just by the man she was blocking, but now by an accomplice. Her face hardened, her cheeks flushing a dull red. "Sir, this does not concern you," she said to Mark, before turning her full, venomous attention back to Julian. "That's it. You've caused a disturbance, and you've refused to leave. You leave me no choice." Her finger pressed down. A silent alarm was triggered. Through the frosted glass, Julian could see a subtle shift inside the lounge. A man in a slightly different uniform, speaking into his sleeve, began walking toward the entrance. Julian Vance, a man who commanded boardrooms, who advised governments, who could move global markets with a single press release, was about to be escorted away from a VIP lounge by airport security. The humiliation was absolute. He looked at Brenda one last time, his gaze holding no anger, only a profound, crystalline clarity. He saw her not as a person, but as a symbol of a deep, systemic flaw, a bug in the code, and Julian Vance was, above all else, an expert at debugging systems. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He picked up his phone and his Centurion card from the counter. "This was a mistake," he said, his voice quiet but resonant. The words were not for her. They were a verdict. He turned his back on the counter, on the lounge, and on Brenda Miller just as two uniformed security officers arrived at his side. He didn't wait for them to speak. He simply started walking away, his posture perfect, his stride unbroken, leaving a stunned journalist and a line of bewildered passengers in his wake. He was leaving the scene of the problem so that he could begin to implement the solution. The walk from the Sky Club to Gate F14 was one of the longest of Julian's life. It wasn't the physical distance, but the psychic weight of the journey. The two security guards flanked him, not touching him, but their presence was an announcement to everyone in the bustling concourse. Heads turned, people stared, their faces a mixture of curiosity and judgment. They saw a well-dressed black man being escorted by security, and their minds filled in the blanks with pre-written narratives of trouble, of aggression, of criminality. Each glance was a tiny paper cut to his dignity. He didn't look at them. He focused on the shimmering floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the tarmac. A Delta 777 was being pushed back from its gate, its massive engines beginning to whine. The logo on its tail, the red widget, seemed to mock him. It was a symbol of a partnership he was about to obliterate. The guards left him at the gate, their duty done. Julian found a seat in the crowded boarding area, a stark contrast to the serene luxury he had been denied. The air was thick with the smell of fast food and the cries of a tired baby. He slid into a hard plastic chair, the anonymity of the crowd a small mercy. He pulled out his phone, not to make a call, but to look at a picture. It was of Maya, his daughter, grinning backstage at a previous recital, her cello case covered in stickers. Her smile was the anchor in his tumultuous world. He was doing all of this for her, to build a world where she would never have to face a Brenda Miller, where her worth would never be questioned at a glance. But in this moment, he was failing. He was stuck in Atlanta, embroiled in a sordid, demeaning drama, while the clock ticked down to her performance in San Francisco. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Mark Chen, the journalist from Wired. "Mr. Vance, I am so sorry for what I just witnessed. That was completely unacceptable. If you're willing, I'd like to report on it. This is a story that needs to be told." Julian read the message and took a deep breath. His first instinct was to say yes, to unleash the full power of the press on Delta. But he quickly suppressed it. A public spectacle would make him the story, casting him as a victim. Julian Vance was never the victim. He was the agent of change. He would control this narrative. He would not let it control him. He replied simply, "Mark, I appreciate the offer. Please hold off for now. This requires a more direct approach." The boarding call for his flight to San Francisco finally came. He filed onto the plane with the other passengers, the sense of public space a grating reminder of the private one he'd been excluded from. As he settled into his Delta One suite, a plush, secluded pod at the front of the aircraft, the irony was crushing. He was in one of the most exclusive seats in the sky, a private haven of luxury, but he had been deemed unworthy of the waiting room on the ground. A flight attendant, all smiles and practiced hospitality, offered him a glass of champagne. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Vance. Can I get you anything before we take off?" He looked at her, at the Delta uniform, at the logo on the flute of champagne. He saw the disconnect between the brand's promise and its reality. "Just water, thank you," he said. As the plane ascended, banking over the sprawling lights of Atlanta, Julian closed his eyes. He wasn't angry anymore. Anger was a hot, inefficient emotion. What he felt now was a cold, clear sense of purpose. He began to do what he did best, analyze a complex system and identify the points of failure. The system was Delta Airlines. The initial point of failure was Brenda Miller. But was she the cause, or just a symptom? A culture, he knew, flows from the top down. A company that truly valued inclusion and respect would not produce a Brenda Miller. Or if it did, it would have mechanisms to correct her behavior instantly. The system hadn't corrected the error, it had compounded it by calling security. The entire protocol was flawed. The brand was a hollow shell, and his company, Aura Dynamics, was about to pour $200 million into that hollow shell. They were about to link their name, their reputation for precision and integrity, to this deeply flawed culture. The tagline, Delta Sky Club, powered by Aura Dynamics, now seemed like a sick joke. Powered by what? Suspicion? Bigotry? He ran the numbers in his head. The cost of cancelling the deal would be immense. There were preliminary setup costs, legal fees, and the opportunity cost of months of negotiations. His marketing team would be furious. His board would have questions. It would be a messy, complicated, and expensive divorce. Then he calculated the alternative, the cost of proceeding. He imagined shaking hands with Delta's CEO, Ed Bastian, at a press conference, smiling for the cameras while knowing that any of his black employees, his black executives, even he himself, could be humiliated at any moment by a rogue employee acting with the full, perceived authority of the Delta brand. The cost of that hypocrisy was incalculable. It would be a cancer at the heart of his own company's culture. It would invalidate every speech he'd ever given about respect and meritocracy. The decision crystallized, not with a bang, but with the quiet, inexorable logic of a mathematical proof. The partnership was impossible. The deal was dead. When the plane landed in San Francisco, it was 9:30 p.m. Pacific time. He turned on his phone and saw a string of texts from his ex-wife. Recital started. Maya is amazing. Her solo is next. Where are you? She keeps looking for you in the audience. It's over now. She did beautifully. But she's heartbroken you weren't here. Each message was a dagger. He had crossed his own red line. Brenda Miller hadn't just insulted him. She had stolen a precious, unrecoverable moment from him and his daughter. The professional had now become devastatingly personal. The finality of his decision settled in his soul, as solid and as heavy as granite. He checked into his hotel, the Fairmont on Nob Hill, his mind a whirlwind. He didn't call his daughter. What could he say? Sorry I missed your recital, honey. A woman at the airport thought I was a fraud. The excuse felt as pathetic as the incident itself. He showered, the hot water doing little to wash away the grime of the day. He put on a fresh shirt and sat down at the desk in his suite, the glittering lights of San Francisco spread out before him. He picked up his phone. He had one call to make. It was 1:30 a.m. in Atlanta, but he knew she would be awake. She was always working. The phone rang twice. Sarah, he said, his voice devoid of exhaustion. It's Julian. Sarah Jenkins, the COO of Aura Dynamics and Julian's most trusted colleague for over a decade, answered immediately. Julian, is everything okay? I tracked your flight. You landed a while ago. I'm fine, Sarah. But we have a situation. He proceeded to recount the events at the Sky Club, his tone flat and factual, like an engineer dictating a damage report. He omitted the emotional impact, the humiliation, the missed recital. He just gave her the data points, the denial of entry, the demand for ID, the lie about a system flag, the journalist, the security guards. Sarah was silent on the other end, but Julian could picture her perfectly, her eyes closed, her hand pinching the bridge of her nose, processing the sheer, idiotic self-destructiveness of it all. Unbelievable, she finally breathed. Just unbelievable. Do you want me to get legal on the phone with Delta's general counsel first thing in the morning? We can light them up. No, Julian said. This isn't a negotiation. It's a notification. First thing tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Eastern sharp, I want you to send a single email. Address it directly to Ed Bastian. CC their entire executive board and our own. What's the message? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. The message is 2 sentences, Julian instructed. Quote, "Effective immediately, Aura Dynamics is terminating all negotiations and withdrawing our $200 million partnership proposal. We consider Delta Airlines to be an unsafe and unreliable partner for our brand, our employees, and our customers." That's it. No further explanation. There was a long pause on the line. The sum was staggering. The move was audacious. "Julian, are you absolutely sure?" Sarah asked, her voice steady. It was her job to question him, to be the final check on his impulses. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life," Julian replied. "We built this company on the principle that systems must be flawless and people must be treated with respect. Delta has failed on both counts. This is not a partnership. It is a liability. Cancel it." "Okay," Sarah said, her voice now filled with the same steely resolve as his. "Consider it done." Julian hung up the phone. He looked out the window at the city lights. The financial fallout would begin in the morning, but the real consequence had already been paid, in a silent auditorium, with an empty seat in the front row. At 7:59 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sarah Jenkins sat at her desk in Aura Dynamics' sleek Atlanta headquarters. Her office, a glass-walled space overlooking the company's bustling operations floor, was a testament to organized efficiency. On her screen was an email, drafted and waiting. The recipient list was a who's who of corporate aviation: Ed Bastian, CEO of Delta Airlines; Glenn Hohenstein, President; Peter Carter, Chief Legal Officer, and a dozen other VPs and board members. She had spent the hours after Julian's call preparing for the shockwave. She had already alerted Aura's CFO, their head of PR, and their legal team, briefing them under strict confidentiality. They were to say nothing, respond to nothing, until she gave the word. The strategy was clear. Absolute silence. Let the email speak for itself, and let Delta make the first move into the void. Her finger hovered over the send button. It felt like pushing a detonator. She thought about Julian. She had been with him since the early days, when the company was just 5 people in a rented office space. She had seen him out to negotiate Silicon Valley giants and charm skeptical venture capitalists. She had also seen him, on more than one occasion, fire a client on the spot for disrespecting a junior employee. His ethos of respect wasn't a corporate platitude. It was the company's source code. This move, as drastic as it was the most Julian thing he could possibly do. The clock on her monitor flipped to 8:09 a.m. She clicked. The email vanished from her outbox, an electronic torpedo fired into the heart of Delta's C-suite. 30 miles away, in Delta's global headquarters near the airport, Ed Bastian was in his first meeting of the day, a quarterly review with his marketing division. They were discussing the final rollout plans for the Aura Dynamics partnership. A senior VP was presenting a slide deck filled with mock-ups, a gleaming Sky Club entrance with the Powered by Aura Dynamics subtitle, a CGI rendering of a 747 cargo bay being loaded by sleek, intelligent robots, a proposed joint Super Bowl commercial. The mood was buoyant, celebratory. The deal was a coup, a monumental leap forward for the airline. Bastian's chief of staff, a sharp young woman named Amelia, slipped into the room and approached him, her face pale. She placed a tablet in front of him, displaying Sarah Jenkins's email. Bastian, a man known for his unflappable, personable demeanor, read the 2 sentences. He read them again. The words didn't seem to connect. It was like reading a sentence in a foreign language he almost knew. Terminating negotiations. Withdrawing $200 million, unsafe and unreliable partner. He looked up at Amelia, his eyes wide with confusion. Is this a joke? A hack? It came directly from Sarah Jenkins' verified corporate account, Amelia whispered. I've already had our IT security team confirm its authenticity. It's real." The CEO pushed his chair back, the legs scraping loudly on the floor. The marketing VP trailed off mid-sentence, the entire room falling silent as they watched their leader's face contort with a mixture of disbelief and alarm. "Get Sarah Jenkins on the phone, now," Bastian commanded, his voice low and urgent. "And get me everything we have on our recent interactions with Julian Vance. Every email, every meeting, every phone call." He stood up and walked to the window, his back to the stunned room. He was looking out over the airfield, the concrete arteries of his kingdom. An unsafe partner, unreliable. Julian Vance was one of the most respected, level-headed CEOs in the tech world. He wasn't prone to whims or tantrums. Something had happened. Something terrible. Amelia returned a few minutes later, her expression even more grim. "Sarah Jenkins's assistant says she's unavailable. She's in an all-day off-site meeting and cannot be reached." It was a classic corporate stonewall, a clear sign they weren't talking. "What about Vance?" Bastian pressed. "His assistant says the same thing. Mr. Vance is traveling for personal reasons and is unreachable," Amelia reported. The dam of confusion broke, and a flood of pure corporate panic rushed in. "Unreachable? A $200 million deal is on fire and they're unreachable," Bastian's voice rose. "Somebody find out what the hell happened." The order set off a frantic, high-speed investigation. Legal, corporate security, and customer relations were all activated. They scoured their records for any negative interaction with Julian Vance. They found nothing but glowing reports, successful meetings, cordial emails, mutual excitement about the partnership. Then, a junior analyst in corporate security had a thought. He cross-referenced Vance's travel itinerary, which they had on file from his corporate booking, with airport incident reports from the past 24 hours. A flag popped up. Hartsfield-Jackson, Concourse F. A customer disturbance, logged at the Sky Club entrance. The customer's name was not listed, but the time and location matched Vance's layover perfectly. The report was filed by the on-duty manager, Brenda Miller. The report was brief and self-serving. Unidentified male attempted to gain access with fraudulent credentials, became belligerent when denied, refused to leave. Security was called to de-escalate. "Get me the CCTV footage from the F Concourse Sky Club yesterday, between 4 and 5 p.m., Bastian ordered. Within 15 minutes, the grainy video was playing on the large screen in the boardroom. They watched in horrified silence. They saw Julian Vance, a man they were about to herald as their most important partner, approach the desk. They saw him calmly present his credentials. They saw Brenda Miller's dismissive body language. They saw her repeated swiping of the card. They saw him produce his ID. They watched her hold it up to his face. They couldn't hear the audio, but the visual story was damning. Then they saw Mark Chen step forward. Someone in the room gasped. "Is that Mark Chen from Wired?" The final scene played out. Brenda pressing the button, the security guards arriving, and Julian Vance turning and walking away with what looked like immeasurable, soul-crushing dignity. The video ended, but the image of his retreating back lingered in the air like a ghost. Ed Bastian sank into his chair. He felt physically ill. The whole thing took less than 5 minutes. 5 minutes of petty tyranny from a single employee had just vaporized a $250 million deal and potentially ignited a PR catastrophe of epic proportions. As if on cue, Amelia's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, and all the color drained from her face. "Ed," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "you need to see this." She turned the phone around. It was a new article, just published on Wired.com. The byline was Mark Chen. The headline was explosive. Dignity over dollars. I watched Delta Airlines humiliate a black CEO. He's a partner they can't afford to lose. The article was a first-person, minute-by-minute account of the entire incident. It was detailed, visceral, and utterly devastating. Chen described Julian's calm demeanor, Brenda's escalating hostility, and the quiet, chilling display of casual corporate racism. He didn't mention the cancelled deal. He didn't know about it yet, which made the article even more powerful. It wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. The earthquake had begun, and the aftershocks were about to tear Delta apart. Mark Chen's article hit the internet not like a rock in a pond, but like a meteor strike. Within an hour, it was the top story on every tech news aggregator. By noon, it had been picked up by mainstream outlets: CNN, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. The headline was too compelling to ignore: a perfect storm of race, corporate power, and airline drama. The hashtag #UrsDelta debacle was trending worldwide on Twitter. The story was a viral wildfire, and Delta's corporate headquarters was ground zero. Phones rang incessantly. The PR department was drowning in a tsunami of media requests. Their social media channels were a dumpster fire of public outrage. Long-time Delta customers posted pictures of themselves cutting up their Sky Miles cards, vowing to fly with competitors. Celebrities and politicians weighed in, condemning the airline. The narrative was brutal and simple. Delta Airlines, an Atlanta-based company in a city that was the cradle of the civil rights movement, had racially profiled and humiliated a prominent black CEO. The fact that they were on the verge of a massive partnership with his company added a layer of spectacular, almost comical, corporate suicide. Inside the boardroom, the mood was funereal. The initial panic had subsided, replaced by the grim reality of crisis management. They were in freefall, and they needed to pull the parachute. "What do we know about this employee, Brenda Miller?" Ed Bastian demanded, pacing the room. A shaken HR executive read from a file. Brenda Miller, 58, employed with Delta for 22 years, started as a gate agent, promoted to Sky Club lead 8 years ago. Performance reviews are average. A few minor customer complaints over the years for rudeness, but nothing that triggered a formal review. Lives in Fayetteville. Divorced, 1 son. 22 years, Bastian muttered, rubbing his temples. She wasn't some new hire who didn't know better. She was a veteran, a product of their culture. "Fire her," he said, the words tasting like ash. "Effective immediately. No severance. Escort her from the property." "Legal advisors against that," Peter Carter, the chief legal officer, interjected. "Wrongful termination lawsuit. She'll claim she was just following procedure. It'll get messy." "Messier than this?" Bastian shot back, gesturing wildly at the tablet, showing the plummeting Delta stock price in pre-market trading. "We are hemorrhaging brand value by the second. She is the face of this disaster. She's gone. I'll take the risk of a lawsuit. What's next?" "A public statement," the head of PR said, his voice strained. "We need to get ahead of this. A full-throated apology. We need to announce a complete review of our policies, mandatory sensitivity training, the works." "Draft it," Bastian ordered. "And it needs to be from me. No corporate speak. I need to own this, personally." His gaze then fell on the most important piece of the puzzle. "We need to talk to Julian Vance. I don't care what his assistant says. We need to get him on the phone." For the rest of the afternoon, they tried. They called his office. They called his cell phone, which went straight to voicemail. They sent emails to Sarah Jenkins. They even reached out to a mutual acquaintance on the board of a tech non-profit they both supported. The wall of silence from Aura Dynamics was absolute, impenetrable. Julian wasn't just ghosting them. He had erased them from his universe. His silence was louder and more damning than any public condemnation he could have issued. It said, "You are not worth my time." Meanwhile, the story of Brenda Miller's firing was leaked to the press, a calculated move to show that Delta was taking action. But it backfired. The internet hordes, now fully invested in the drama, immediately pivoted. Brenda Miller became a cause célèbre for a different, angrier segment of the population. A GoFundMe was started for her legal defense, fueled by comments about cancel culture and corporate cowardice. She was recast as a victim, a working-class woman thrown under the bus to appease a woke mob and a billionaire CEO. The story was metastasizing, growing new, uglier heads. Finally, late in the evening, a breakthrough. The mutual acquaintance called Bastian back. "Ed, I spoke to a member of Julian's senior team. He won't talk to you. They're not taking calls. But he did say I could pass along a message for you." Bastian leaned forward, desperate. "What is it?" He said, and I'm quoting here, "Tell Ed that Aura Dynamics is a company of engineers. When we find a fatal flaw in a system, we don't try to patch it. We decommission it and build a better one. We advise Delta to do the same." The line went dead. Bastian stared at his phone. Decommission it. It wasn't just about the deal anymore. Julian Vance was delivering a verdict on his entire company. The message was clear. Your apologies are worthless. Your training is a band-aid. Your entire corporate culture is rotten from the inside out. The weight of the last 12 hours crashed down on him. The stock price was down 4%. The brand was a global laughingstock, and the one man who could possibly help them begin to fix it had just written them off as a lost cause. That night, Ed Bastian did something he hadn't done in years. He personally wrote an email, not as a CEO, but as a man. He sent it to Julian's personal email address, which he had to get from a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. Subject: I am profoundly sorry. Julian, there are no words to adequately express my apology for what happened to you at our Sky Club. I have seen the video. I have read the reports. What you experienced was a failure on every level. A failure of our systems, a failure of our training, and a failure of our basic human decency. It is inexcusable. I know that the partnership is lost. I am not writing to try and save it. I am writing to say that the issues you exposed are now my #1 priority. The idea that any customer, let alone a partner and a respected leader like yourself, could be treated that way is an indictment of my leadership. I am not asking for your forgiveness. I am asking for a chance, when you are ready, to listen. I will fly anywhere, any time, to meet you and hear your perspective. What you have shown me is that we have a cancer in our organization, and I need to cut it out. Sincerely, Ed Bastian. He hit send and stared out at the dark tarmac, at the red and blue lights of the planes that carried his company's name. For the first time, he felt like he wasn't looking at a symbol of global connection, but at the scene of a terrible crime. For Brenda Miller, the world ended, not with a bang, but with a phone call from a mid-level HR manager she'd never met. The voice on the other end was cold, detached, and reading from a script. Due to a violation of company policy and the code of conduct, your employment with Delta Airlines is terminated, effective immediately. She was sitting in her small, meticulously clean townhouse in Fayetteville when the call came. She had just gotten home from her shift, her feet aching, her mind still replaying the confrontation with the arrogant man from the day before. She had felt a surge of pride in how she'd handled it. She had followed the rules. She had protected the club, When she saw the security guards arrive, she felt vindicated. The HR manager's words didn't register at first. Terminated? What are you talking about? I have been with this company for 22 years. The decision is final, Ms. Miller. Security will be at your home within the hour to collect your company property, your ID badge and uniform. The line clicked dead. Brenda sat in stunned silence, the receiver still pressed to her ear. 22 years. Her entire adult life. Wiped out. For what? For doing her job? Then her world truly began to unravel. Her son, Ryan, a freshman at Georgia Tech, called her, his voice frantic. "Mum, what did you do? What did you do?" he yelled. "You're all over the internet. People are saying—" "Mum, they're saying you're a racist." She fumbled with her old laptop, her hands shaking. She found the articles. She saw her name. Her face, a grainy security camera still, was everywhere. She read Mark Chen's article, her actions twisted and portrayed as some kind of hateful performance. She saw the comments, thousands of them, calling her a Karen, a bigot, a monster. Her home address had been posted on a message board. People were threatening her. She was fired, publicly shamed, and terrified. But through the fear, a hard, bitter resentment began to form. It wasn't her fault. It was his. The man in the suit. Julian Vance. He had done this to her. He and his money and his power. He had set out to ruin her life because she wouldn't bend the rules for him. The narrative in her mind was simple and clean. She was the victim. The GoFundMe campaign started by a stranger gave her a sliver of hope. She saw the donations pour in, accompanied by messages of support. Stand strong. Don't let the woke mob win. She wasn't a racist. She was a soldier in a culture war she didn't even know she was fighting. She hired a lawyer who promised to sue Delta for wrongful termination and Julian Vance for defamation. She would be vindicated. She would be rich. But karma, Julian knew, was not a lightning bolt from the heavens. It was a perfectly balanced ledger. It was a system of inputs and outputs, of actions and consequences that always, eventually, found its equilibrium. And the karma for Brenda Miller was not to be found in public opinion or a courtroom. It was far more personal, far more devastating. A week into the media firestorm, Ryan called her again. He was crying. "Mom, I'm losing my scholarship," he sobbed. "I got an email from the dean's office. They're reviewing it." Brenda's heart stopped. The scholarship was the only reason Ryan could afford a prestigious school like Georgia Tech. It was the Vanguard in STEM scholarship, a full-ride award given to 5 promising students from underprivileged backgrounds in the Atlanta area each year. It was her proudest achievement, the culmination of all her hopes for her son. "Why? On what grounds?" she demanded. "They wouldn't say," Ryan cried. "Just that it's under review pending an ethics and community standards investigation. Mum, this scholarship is my whole future." Brenda's lawyer made some calls, and what he discovered was the final, brutal twist of the knife. He found the source of the scholarship's funding. He traced it back through a series of community foundations and charitable trusts to its ultimate benefactor. The Vanguard in STEM scholarship program was the flagship philanthropic initiative of the Vance Foundation, the personal charity of its founder and sole funder, Julian Vance. It was funded entirely by Aura Dynamics, the man she had humiliated, the man she had tried to have arrested, the man whose face she had sneered at, was the silent, anonymous benefactor who was paying for her son's entire college education. He was the one who had given her son the future she had always dreamed of for him. The news broke Brenda. It was a blow from which her self-constructed narrative of victimhood could not recover. The sheer, cosmic irony of it was too much to bear. Her act of petty, prejudiced gatekeeping had not just cost her a job, it had jeopardized the single most important thing in her life, a gift given by the very person she had wronged. The shame was a physical thing, a crushing weight that left her breathless. She looked at her son, at his brilliant, promising future, and saw that it was built on the grace of a man she had treated with utter contempt. She hadn't just been wrong, she had been a fool. Her blind prejudice had led her to attack her own family's salvation. The lawsuit against Delta was quietly dropped. The GoFundMe money was returned. The fight went out of her. There was nothing left but the quiet, echoing ruin of her life, a monument to a single, 5-minute failure of character. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, Julian Vance finally read Ed Bastian's email. He also received a report from his foundation's director about the Brenda Miller situation and the scholarship review. His instruction back to the foundation was swift and unequivocal. Ryan Miller's scholarship is not to be touched. His mother's actions are her own. He earned his place on merit. Do not punish a child for the sins of a parent. Ensure his funding is secure for the full 4 years. Julian deleted Bastian's email without replying. His point had been made. His actions had spoken for him. He had debugged the system. What Delta did next was their problem. He had a company to run, and more importantly, a daughter to see. He had already booked a flight for the following weekend to attend her local youth orchestra performance. This time he would be flying United. 2 weeks after the incident, the paths of the two companies had diverged dramatically. For Delta Airlines, it was a time of painful and public reckoning. Spurred by the viral story and a plummeting stock price, CEO Ed Bastian initiated a costly, top-to-bottom overhaul of their customer service culture, desperately trying to rebuild a brand shattered by a single employee's prejudice. For Aura Dynamics, the outcome was transformative. Julian Vance's principled stand became a legend within his company, cementing a culture of integrity more valuable than any marketing campaign. The business world took note. United Airlines, seeing an opportunity, eagerly stepped into the void. They forged a new partnership with Aura, one valued at $250 million and built on a foundation of mutual respect. Delta's staggering loss had become Aura's significant gain. But the story's true conclusion didn't happen in a boardroom. It unfolded in a quiet high school auditorium in San Francisco. Julian Vance sat in the front row, his phone turned completely off. He was not a CEO, he was just a dad. When his daughter Maya walked on stage with her cello, her eyes scanned the crowd. She saw her father, and a radiant smile broke across her face. Julian smiled back, a warmth spreading through his chest that no business deal could ever replicate. As she played Bach, the complex, beautiful music filled the hall. Julian listened, understanding that his decision hadn't just been about corporate values. It was about building a life where he could be fully present for the moments that truly mattered. He had found a fatal crack in a foundation, walked away, and chosen to build on stronger ground. When the final, resonant note faded into silence, Julian was on his feet, clapping louder than anyone. He had missed one performance, but in doing so, he had reaffirmed everything he stood for and secured a future built on unwavering respect. This story serves as a powerful reminder that in our hyper-connected world, the actions of a single individual can create ripples that become tidal waves, shaking the foundations of even the most powerful corporations. Julian Vance's quiet dignity and decisive action demonstrated that the highest form of power isn't about shouting the loudest, but about having the conviction to walk away from a $250 million table when respect is no longer being served. It's a lesson in the true value of integrity, a currency that can't be printed, only earned. Brenda Miller's devastating karma wasn't a punishment from above. It was the natural, tragic consequence of her own choices, a poignant lesson that our biases can often cause the most harm to ourselves. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help it reach more people. Share it with someone who appreciates stories about real-world consequences and principled leadership. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive. What are your thoughts on how this was handled? Let us know in the comments below.